Hey, Tampa Bay! Woo! All right, well, I've been part of Ignite for quite a while. I've worked on some of the very first ones. My name's Wayne, and I've got to admit, I've always been a bit curious. Ever since I was a boy, what if has been among my first thoughts. And it's just cool because one of my responsibilities for the past 10 plus years has been maintaining an active inventors organization here in Tampa Bay. Now here's something I've been thinking about for a while. Whether you grew up with Futurama or Jetsons, you have thought about riding in a tube. Now I learned at an early age, humans are not as durable as our cartoon counterparts, so this kind of thing will not work. We actually need to ride in something, and it's not a new idea. This is a 1956 rendering of an atomic train in a glass tunnel, and on the right is an actual postal tube train that ran in England over 150 years ago, before AC power, and yes, even before the QWERTY keyboard. Now, the route I'm talking about is from the port of Tampa to the Orlando airport, because it would make use of an existing pipeline built in 1965. That should help save money on not having to acquire land rights, and links infrastructure to infrastructure for shipping along the high-tech corridor. Now you're thinking, well, what about high-speed rail? Well, Amtrak has been subsidized by taxpayers for decades, and I don't think making more expensive trains is going to make that any better. We need a 21st century solution that's faster and cheaper. So what is a Hyperloop? A Hyperloop is a closed-tube, low-pressure system that uses magnets to levitate and propel a vehicle through a tube. It would have two tubes to accommodate travel in both directions and could be elevated, ground level, or buried. It would likely be covered with solar cells to help generate electricity and could be built along highways to link urban centers to help eliminate traffic and pollution. Of the 35 currently proposed cities to connect with a Hyperloop, Miami to Orlando are on the books, so Tampa Bay had best start getting in the game. So how does it work? The pressure in the tube is lowered to about 1,000th the pressure at sea level to reduce friction and wind resistance. Linear induction motors along the tube generate lift and propulsion, and a giant compressor pulls the vehicle through the tube. The payload could accommodate cargo similar to a tractor trailer, could be fitted to seat several dozen passengers. The development is leaning towards individual cars rather than a long train, but the development is still incomplete, so there's no formal design set in stone. Now, the speed that they're looking at for a Hyperloop is over 700 miles an hour. Now, bear in mind, the speed of sound is 760 miles an hour at sea level. Now, the vacuum in the tube could allow for a greater range, but that would essentially mean a trip from Tampa to Orlando in about 10 minutes, or about as long as 2 Ignite presentations. So you might be asking, well, what makes this Hyperloop any greener than the next Hyperloop? Well, my idea is to employ one of the most powerful forces in nature. I want to integrate the mass, volume, pressure, and beauty of falling water. The idea is to elevate water by pumping it to a high point and using that as stored energy for propulsion, electrical generation, compression, and suction too. Now, to do this, we would build 2 towers, both here and in Orlando. And then we would coordinate sending the vehicles in opposite directions at the same time. And depending on if we're trying to move an individual vehicle or a train would determine the frequency of the transport. Now the idea is to use solar energy to generate electricity to pump the water, although on rainy days in Tampa we could probably just open the doors and let the water come in. Or we could use focused solar energy to run a steam turbine and pump the water. The water is pumped to the top of the tower, and it's released through hydroelectric motors that help generate more electricity. The water is gathered in essentially a suspended bucket tightly fitted inside the walls of the tower. And for example, 100,000 gallons of water would provide a mass of 400 tons that we could use for propulsion. When the volume is reached and it's time to send the vehicle, the bucket descends down the tower along the gears that grabs the vehicle and thrusts it forward. At the same time, the air below the bucket is compressed, creating a high pressure condition behind the vehicle with low pressure in front of it to help shoot it down the tube. As the weight forces the bucket down, it can create suction from above and help lower the air pressure in the return tube, sucking the Orlando vehicle towards it. Now, the idea of doing it from Orlando was to give countless theme park visitors easy access to the cruise ships here in Tampa, in the port of Tampa, and provide them with an opportunity to enjoy some of the world's best beaches. And, enjoy some of the high-class, world-class ice hockey as well. We've got a couple of things going for us right now. Jeff Vinnick is currently redeveloping the area to be more tourist-friendly, and Elon Musk is developing the technology that we would need to make this happen. And so, this is just one inventor's idea to ignite a conversation. And, I invite you to connect with other inventors in the Tampa Bay area. Our meetup is TBIC-US, or email me directly, and let's make this happen. Thank you.